They run the shuffle really well.
And how did you find when you tried to implement it in Sydney? You guys ran a bit of it.
A little bit. The first year I did, it was difficult. It was difficult because...
From what perspective?
The generation that's coming through now is coming through with different priorities. A lot more on-ball action, a lot of pick and roll, not as much off-the-ball action. And it takes a discipline, and it takes understanding, and it's pretty structured. And to get the guys to run it exactly what you were talking about before, D, to get them to run it where it wasn't just motion for the sake of motion, to be able to read and react out of it. And for every action, there's a penalty in the shuffle.
Yeah.
But to get them, it takes time. It takes time to get the nuances and get them all on the same page, and find that balance between the structure and the native instinctive play. It was difficult. And as we went on, we still tried to run it. We didn't run it as much in the second and third years, but I still tried to say it because I believe in it and know the strength of it. But it was difficult, and
there's two things. I heard that from players that played under your dad that he was just meticulous in his teaching of the shuffle offense. Like, your feet need to be here. This cut needs to be here. And
absolutely,
they were very. He was very pinpoint with his instruction, with his teaching, and with his coaching.
Spot on. And I tried to do that, but the problem with it, and again, I'm not critical of this. This is just the life it is meticulous, and it is labor intensive, and it's monotonous because you're constantly having to correct and pick. Whereas guys, they want to play. They want to play, and the constant stop-starting. I mean, you had Jason Cadee on before, and I was regularly having to bite my lip and say, I want to stop this. I want to stop this. I want to stop this. But after a period of time, you get a chance to say, well, I got to find another method to get this method across. Yeah. Because it was counterproductive.
The other thing, Drew, is that nowadays with so much player mobility, it's hard to establish that offensive rhythm over a course of 3 or 4 years. You guys at the Tigers ran that thing with very few changing parts over a number of years. So, that's hard to simulate now, man.
No, it is. It is. And I still think that there's a space for that type of action. And like I said, the Perth Wildcats have won with they do a variety of things, but they run flex. Their foundation is passing and cutting, and which out of that system they create shots for their main guys. And it's the same thing. And there's so many different things. I barely felt I scratched the surface of trying to get that message across with what we were doing with Sydney. But I get it. I understand. It's trying to find that balance. And I think that there are periods over the time that I look back on with Sydney where I felt we really did have a good balance, and it was being productive. But I wouldn't say I was fighting, or they were fighting it. Certainly in year 3 with the guys we had, we had some long conversations, and I had to change it, and I was prepared to walk away from it because you lose the group. I'm not that sold on it that you can't use the other methods to get the things that you can get out of what you do with the shuffle. Find other ways to do it, but it wasn't as easy as I think it should have been, and that's on me because either it's a communication thing, not understanding the balances, and I didn't do a great job with that.
How did you find? Because I mean, let's be real about it. Through your playing career, not that you were a dictator as a player, but ultimately, if you said something, that's the way it was going to be.
Yeah.
How did you find that as a coach, where you might meet resistance, which is a bit of a paradox because you would think as a player you wouldn't have that power, but you did have that power, and as a coach you would think you would have that power, and perhaps you didn't have that power from what you're just saying.
No, well, I had the power. It's how I think to sort
or
of
maybe the
summarize, if
buy-in.
I'm wrong, the question that you're asking is how do you hold people accountable? Is the question I think you're asking. You say, well, how with what you're doing do you get them to do what you're trying to achieve? And that's the art. That's what you're constantly trying to figure out the best way to do that. My way was to try and empower the players. I would listen to the players and say, this is what I think, but I wasn't going to be pig-headed enough to relent on everything. There were certain non-negotiables. This is what we had to do. There were certain things that you say, no, mate, I don't care. This is what we're going to do. But there are other times when I was open-minded and understood that there may be other ways in which we could get the outcome that we're all looking for with empowering the players and trying to get their feedback. So I personally felt I didn't have a problem with that. I think that in my judgment, as I look back on it and you self-analyse and you go through what I went through with Sydney, I would say that the feedback that if you ask most of the players, or many of the players, I shouldn't say most, but many of the players, that perhaps that I didn't hold them accountable enough, that I wasn't dictatorial enough. But that was certainly by design, and I walk away comfortable with the relationships, how in which I wanted to run the program and build a program. But I'm also understand and reflect whether it's the feedback at the end of the seasons that you get from the one-on-one conversations we have with your players, to understand that I didn't always get that right. You know, it was something that they would perhaps not be all that complimentary about me in that particular element of it.
And obviously you get some, I mean, look, it's tough. We know basketball isn't football. You know, there's basically 10 to 12 and, you know, you're tight, you're hanging.
You got 15 guys, 15 or 16 when you count your DPs. And, you're working a lot. The other thing that I learned from the first year D, as opposed to my era, it was labor intensive. You know, 2.5 hour sessions were the norm. Mate, after that first year, I really had to adjust because, you know, a lot of the guys, the feedback was we were trying to do, we were going too long. And
how long were you going? I mean, now Drew, you're renowned as I remember, you know, the guys would always be like, damn it, Drew, he wants to practice again. And so you liked practicing because basketball was your life, is your passion. And this is the thing, and I call it guys that love to play the game or love to be involved in the game. Those are true ballers. And then you have lifestyle guys. And this is hard to come to terms with for someone like you and me, who we're going to be in basketball till they put us in the grave.
Well, that's
not
it.
Everyone's like that, Drew.
No, well, I think the guys, I think they and I put it down to more of these guys need so many variations, you know, that just coming in and doing what we did, where we're 2.5 hours, we're in a team, and of that 2.5 hours, I'd say 15, 20 minutes might have been individual type skills, and then you do your individuals on top of your team practice.
Exactly.
Whereas there's so many different elements to keep them fresh these days as opposed to what we did. And that's not a criticism at all. You know, they're working. They're working probably more hours when you throw in the more video, the analysis that you do, how you go through the scout, all those. The hours are there. You got to be extremely committed. But I struggled. Not struggled. I guess that's the wrong word. But finding that balance, I think early on, is to say, well, you know, if I go back through my notes of the exit meetings after year one, it was like, you know, you talk too much and the sessions are too long. And that's cool. And I absolutely accept that. But where I think I tried to find the compromise was, I don't know whether in particular in year 2 and 3, I spent enough time changing that to say, well, rather than just get what you need to do in that team environment, spend more time in those main sessions on individual work.
Right.
Whereas I would say, well, we're going to get that, and I guess because the sessions were so long, the amount of time after, straight after practice, get an extra half-hour individual type session in. I think that I didn't get that balance right as far as just how in which the time you have to work with players, how you maximize it the best. I don't know whether I really nailed that at all. It was a constant juggling. Like I can't, mate. The day of the game, the day before a game, the amount of work that we were doing this year, and we probably did a little bit more than some of the others. I look at it and go, gee, I feel we're not prepared. I feel like we haven't done enough, and that's probably why you talk more, because you feel like you haven't always done it on the floor. But they're so competitive. They're working so hard. This is absolutely not a criticism by any stretch.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm in awe of the dedication and the commitment of the guys I had with Sydney. I mean, we're really lucky to have really hard-working elite guys.
At the beginning.